They say you never really know the people next door until one quiet afternoon changes everything. I thought it was just another ordinary day on the porch, sipping tea and watching the world slow down. But when José, the boy next door, now grown, walked up to my doorstep, I saw something in his eyes I wasn't prepared for. It wasn't just a visit. It was a shift. And it all began with a single look that unraveled years of assumptions. Before we begin, let me know in the comments, from which city are you watching this? I love seeing where everyone's from. Now, let me take you into the story, the day everything changed. The sun was warm that afternoon, the kind of warmth that hugs your shoulders but doesn't make you sweat. I had the windows open, the wind slipping through the curtains like fingers playing an old familiar tune. My porch had become my little escape lately. A cup of chamomile, the sound of leaves rustling, and just the distant hum of life going on quietly around me. It had been one of those slow days. Nothing urgent, no big plans. I was in my house dress, light blue cotton with a few faded spots from years of washing. My feet were bare, toes curled against the cool wooden floor of the porch, and my hair was lazily pinned up with a few strands falling around my face. 51 isn't old, I keep reminding myself, but some days I felt like time was pulling ahead of me. That's when I saw him. José. It took me a second to recognize him, the boy who used to ride his bike up and down this street, all arms and legs and wild hair. But he wasn't that boy anymore. No, he'd grown into something else. Taller, broader, with that calm confidence that doesn't need to speak loudly to be noticed. He was wearing a simple white t-shirt, jeans with a bit of wear, and he had a small box under one arm. His hair was dark and a little tousled, and when he looked up and saw me, that smile of his, warm, familiar, with something else tucked behind it, made my stomach flutter unexpectedly. "Hi, Miss Victoria," he said, walking up the steps. His voice had that smoothness now, deeper, more grounded. "Mom asked me to drop off a pie she baked. She said it's peach, your favorite." I smiled and sat up a little straighter. "Well, she remembers right," I replied, standing to take the box from him. Our fingers touched briefly. Nothing dramatic, but I felt the warmth. It lingered more than it should have. He looked around. "Place still looks just like I remember." "You make it sound like you've been gone for years," I said. "Well," he laughed, "college makes time feel funny. It's been, 4 years? I'm finishing my last semester." I motioned to the empty chair beside me. "Well, sit a minute, if you've got time." And he did. We talked about everything and nothing. His classes, his mom, the neighborhood. But as we chatted, I started noticing things I hadn't before. The way he leaned in when I spoke, how he watched my face like it mattered to him, how he wasn't distracted by his phone like most young men these days. And then there was the way he looked at me. It wasn't inappropriate. It wasn't disrespectful. But it was. Like he saw through the years, the gray strands in my hair, the lines near my mouth, and didn't mind them. He saw me. I felt flustered in a way I hadn't felt in years, not since before my husband passed. That kind of unexpected awareness that makes you shift in your seat, suddenly wondering about your posture, the neckline of your dress, the way your voice sounds. At one point, there was a pause in the conversation. A quiet, natural silence. He looked at me, his brown eyes steady. "You look really good, Miss Victoria." I mean it. I blinked, not quite sure how to respond. "That's sweet of you to say." He chuckled. "No, I'm serious. I always thought you were beautiful, even when I was a kid." That made me laugh, genuinely. Oh, come on, Jose. I was the old lady next door to you back then. He shrugged, smiling. You were never just the lady next door. And just like that, something shifted. I don't know how to explain it. But the air between us felt heavier, not uncomfortable, just full. Like something unspoken had entered the space and made itself comfortable. I stood up, needing to move. Let me get us something to drink, I said, walking toward the kitchen. In the kitchen, I leaned against the counter for a moment, pressing my hand to my chest. I wasn't nervous. I wasn't scared, but I was aware of myself, of him, of what this visit was turning into. I poured 2 glasses of iced tea and came back outside. He was still there, fingers drumming softly on the arm of the chair, looking out at the street like he'd lived a whole life while I was gone. We sipped quietly for a while. The silence wasn't awkward, it was almost comforting. But there was tension now, subtle, yes, but real. He looked over at me again, softer this time. You ever get lonely? He asked. I met his gaze, holding it. Sometimes, but I tried to keep busy. He nodded like he understood more than I expected. Sometimes I do too, even when I'm surrounded by people. I didn't know what to say to that. Eventually, he stood. I should head back, but I'm glad I came by. So am I said, and I meant it. He stepped closer, close enough that I could see the faint shadow of stubble on his jaw. He leaned in just a little, and for a moment I thought, but no. He just kissed my cheek, light, gentle. See you soon, he said, his voice low. And then he was gone. I stood there on the porch, holding the glass of tea that had gone warm, heart fluttering like a girl half my age. That night I sat up later than usual. The box of peach pie was on the counter, untouched. I couldn't stop thinking about his eyes, his words, that almost kiss. Something had changed, and I wasn't sure where it was heading. But I knew one thing. It wasn't the last time I'd see him. The next few days passed slower than usual. Every time I stepped out onto the porch or walked past my window, I found myself scanning the sidewalk, half hoping to see him again. Jose, my neighbor's son who, with one look and a few simple words, had stirred something in me that I hadn't felt in years. And it wasn't just about the way he looked, though I'd be lying if I said that wasn't part of it. He carried something with him, a quiet steadiness, a genuine curiosity, and respect. I hadn't been on the receiving end of a man's full attention in such a long time, especially from someone so much younger. But he didn't look at me like I was older. He looked at me like I was present, seen, and it had awakened something I wasn't expecting. It was Friday when I saw him again. I was in the backyard, pulling weeds from the little garden bed I tried to keep alive. The sun was warm again, beating down gently, and I had my gloves on, a straw hat shading my face. I heard the gate creak open. I looked up, hand still in the dirt. Hey, he said, smiling. Your mom said I could borrow the ladder. I figured I'd come around back. I stood up, brushing soil from my knees. You know you could have just knocked. I could have, he said, walking closer, but I didn't want to miss seeing your garden again. You always had the prettiest yard on the street. I laughed. It's a mess now. I haven't had the energy for it lately. He tilted his head, his voice softer. Need help with it? I hesitated. You don't have to do that. I want to. There it was again. That quiet tone. No pressure. Just honest intention. He didn't wait for an answer. He crouched down beside the other planter box and started pulling at weeds with his bare hands, dirt collecting under his fingernails. I watched him for a moment, unsure if I should stop him or just let it happen. We worked in silence for a bit, birds chirping around us, the smell of damp soil in the air. Every now and then, I'd glance at him, at how his forearms flexed when he pulled something stubborn from the ground, or how the sunlight made his hair glow around the edges. After a while, we both sat back, dusting ourselves off. I handed him a glass of water from the patio table. "Thanks," he said, sipping it, his lips wet and glistening in the light. "Feels good to do something with my hands. Beats being stuck in front of a laptop all week." I nodded, wiping my forehead with the back of my wrist. "I used to love this garden. My husband and I planted most of it years ago. After he passed, it got harder to keep up." Josie looked over at me, expression steady. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to make you think about that." "It's all right. It's part of the story," I said. "It just hits differently when you're out here in it." He nodded slowly, eyes fixed on me. "I think he must have loved you very deeply. You carry that kind of softness, strength, too." His words weren't rushed. He said them like he meant every syllable. I wasn't sure what to do with that kind of gentleness from a man anymore. I stood, clearing my throat. I should get cleaned up. Dirt's practically baked into my skin. He smiled. "You still look beautiful, even covered in dirt." I felt my cheeks flush, and I gave him a look. "Your trouble, you know that." He stood too, stepping a little closer. Not too close, just enough. Maybe, but only the good kind. We stared at each other a moment longer. The space between us stretched thin. "I should go," he said finally. "But can I come by tomorrow? Help with the rest?" I nodded. "Sure. I'd like that." He walked toward the gate, then paused, turned around. "Do you ever miss being touched?" The question landed like a pebble dropped into still water. I froze. He didn't say it with arrogance or suggestion. It wasn't crude. It was tender, quiet, honest. My mouth was dry. "Yes," I answered truthfully, barely above a whisper. He nodded. "Me too." Then he left. That night, I bathed longer than usual. Not out of vanity, but because his words lingered in my mind. The water was warm, the room quiet except for the soft drip of the faucet. My fingers ran over my arms, my legs, my collarbone, and I realized how foreign my own skin had started to feel. I wrapped myself in a towel and stood before the mirror. My reflection stared back. Older, yes. Softer in places. A little worn. But still here. Still woman. Still alive. And somehow, I felt more seen in that moment than I had in years. Jose wasn't just a young man with kind eyes. He was becoming something else entirely in my world. And I was starting to realize I wanted more than just garden talk and shared silence. But what would that even look like? The next morning, I woke earlier than usual. I wasn't sure if it was nerves or excitement. Maybe both. The house was still, the silence wrapped around me like a familiar blanket, but inside I felt a current of something I hadn't felt in a long, long time. Anticipation. I stood in front of my closet longer than I should have, staring at the hangers like they held the answers to questions I hadn't asked in years. It wasn't a date. It wasn't anything like that. But still, I didn't want to look like I just threw on the first thing I found. I settled on a simple outfit, denim kepris, a soft cream blouse with a scoop neckline that fluttered a little at the shoulders, and a touch of light makeup, just enough to feel fresh, presentable, alive. I was setting a pitcher of lemonade on the back patio table when I heard the gate creak. My heart picked up again, and I didn't even try to hide the smile spreading across my face. Joe stepped in, a small bag slung over one shoulder and a little smudge of oil on his shirt. "Morning," he said, eyes meeting mine. "You look... wow." "Just trying to keep up with the company," I said, brushing invisible lint from my shirt. He walked closer, dropped his bag by the porch, and looked around the yard. "You didn't do any more without me, did you?" "Nope," I said, handing him a glass of lemonade. I waited. The day moved slowly, in the best way. We worked side by side in the sun, laughter sprinkled through conversations, our hands brushing occasionally as we reached for tools or leaned into the same patch of stubborn roots. It was easy with him, comfortable. But underneath it all, something had shifted again. A look here, a pause there, a closeness that neither of us seemed in a hurry to break. Around midday, we sat on the porch steps, wiping sweat from our brows, our knees dotted with dirt. I handed him a napkin, and he chuckled. "I never thought I'd spend a Saturday this way," he said. "No regrets?" I asked, looking sideways at him. He shook his head. "None. This is probably the most peace I've felt in weeks." That hit me more deeply than I expected. I looked down at my hands, still a little dirty, and said, "You know, when you're young, you think you'll have all these people in your life forever. Friends, family, lovers. But time teaches you otherwise." He was quiet for a moment, then said, "I know I'm young, but I feel that too. I've seen things fall apart. People leave. It makes you realize how rare it is to feel connected to someone, to really see someone and have them see you back." I looked at him, and he was already looking at me. Not just casually, truly intently. That same tension returned, only it wasn't uncomfortable. It was warm now, familiar. "I see you, Victoria," he said, voice low. "Not just as my neighbor, not as someone older. I see you." I swallowed hard, feeling something twist in my chest. "And what is it you see?" He leaned in slightly, his voice just above a whisper. "A woman who still feels, who still dreams, who still wants, who still deserves more than the silence she's been sitting in." I didn't move. I couldn't. The air was heavy between us, filled with words that hadn't yet been spoken and glances we weren't sure how to name. Then he reached out slowly, not grabbing, not assuming, just gently placed his hand over mine. His palm was warm, steady, kind. I didn't pull away. "You're not doing anything wrong," he said quietly, sensing my hesitation. "And neither am I." Tears welled in my eyes, unexpected but honest. "It's just been a long time since someone touched me without needing something in return." He gave my hand the slightest squeeze. "Not everyone touches to take." We sat like that for a while, two people, different lives, different decades, but drawn to the same quiet gravity. Eventually, he stood. "I should shower. I've got dirt in places I didn't know existed." He grinned, easing the weight of the moment with his charm. I laughed, wiping the corner of my eye. "Bathrooms through the kitchen. You know the way." He disappeared inside, and I sat there, alone again on the porch, but this time I didn't feel alone. I heard the water turn on inside, and my mind ran ahead of me. The soft sounds of water against tile, the steam rising in the bathroom he'd been in as a boy, now as a man. I didn't rush. I didn't move. I let myself feel everything. Later, he came out, towel-dried hair, wearing the spare t-shirt he had in his bag. He looked fresh, comfortable, but his eyes still carried that depth, that awareness. "I could head out," he said, his voice hesitant, like he was giving me a chance to step back. "You could," I replied, heart pounding, "but you don't have to." He paused, taking that in. Then he nodded slowly and stepped closer. Not in a hurry, not demanding, just present. I reached out, fingers brushing the side of his arm, and he placed his hand gently on mine again. We were standing so close now, I could feel the warmth of his breath. And then, without rush, without pressure, he leaned in and kissed me. Soft, respectful, tender. It wasn't wild. It wasn't desperate. It was right. When it ended, we stayed close, foreheads almost touching. Neither of us said anything for a while. We didn't need to. Because in that quiet, we both understood something. This wasn't just a moment. It was a beginning. The hours after that kiss felt like a dream wrapped in quiet reality. Nothing was rushed, nothing forced, just time folding gently around two people who had stepped into something unexpected, yet deeply real. Those didn't leave right away. He sat beside me on the couch, our hands still linked, neither of us speaking for a long while. The silence wasn't heavy. It was thoughtful, electric in a subtle way. We'd crossed a line, yes, but not in a way that felt reckless or wrong. Instead, it felt like we had finally stopped holding our breath. Eventually, he broke the stillness. "Can I ask you something?" I turned toward him, meeting his eyes. "Of course." "Are you scared?" The honesty in the question struck me. Not because I hadn't considered it. I had. But because he saw it in me, without me saying a word. "I think I'm scared of what people would say," I admitted. "Scared of how this looks, maybe even scared of how much I want it. But no, not scared of you." He nodded slowly, digesting every word. "I get that. But just so you know, I don't care how it looks. Not if it means being real with someone who makes me feel the way you do." I looked down, a small smile pulling at my lips. "And how exactly do I make you feel?" "Grounded. Not like I'm trying to prove anything, just like I'm enough. Like you see me. And I see you, the real you, not the neighbor, not the widow, just Victoria." His words wrapped around something deep inside me, a place I'd kept buried under years of being strong and moving on. It wasn't often someone peeled those layers back and stayed, most only looked from a distance. "Can I stay a while?" he asked. "You already are," I whispered. That evening was unlike anything I expected. There was no rushing into anything physical. It was the kind of intimacy that comes from true presence, two people sharing space, breath, and quiet confessions. We made dinner together in the small kitchen, grilled cheese sandwiches and tomato soup, simple and nostalgic. He stood behind me as I stirred the pot, his hand resting lightly on my lower back like he belonged there. And strangely, it didn't feel foreign. After we ate, we moved to the living room. I lit a candle on the side table, just one, casting a soft glow across the walls. He leaned back on the couch, one arm resting across the backrest, fingers brushing my shoulder. "Tell me something about you I wouldn't know," he said, his tone playful but genuine. I chuckled. I used to sing in a jazz trio when I was 20. We played at a little lounge downtown, nothing big." His eyes lit up. "What? No way. You still sing?" In the shower, mostly. But not lately. He smiled. I'd pay good money to hear that voice. And what about you? I asked, turning toward him. What do I know? He leaned his head back, thinking. When I was 14, I had the biggest crush on you. It sounds ridiculous now, but you were always so poised, graceful, and kind. I didn't know how to understand those feelings at the time. But they stuck with me, even when I left for college. I blinked. You're serious? He nodded. I am. There was no denying what was growing between us anymore. It had roots now, in shared truths, quiet hours, gentle care. We didn't need permission. We only needed honesty, and that we had. As the night deepened, I rested my head on his shoulder. He reached down and laced our fingers together again, like it was the most natural thing in the world. Do you think this, us, has a place in the real world? I asked quietly. Kyosu looked down at me, brushed a strand of hair from my cheek. If it doesn't, I'll help build one where it does. I'm not here for a moment, Victoria. I'm here for you. I closed my eyes, letting his words sink into the places that had long gone numb. I didn't know where it would go, what it would look like in the light of day, but for the first time in years, I didn't feel like I was waiting anymore. I was living. Eventually, he stood, kissed my forehead, and said he'd head home for the night. But only so you can get some rest, he added with a grin. I'll be back tomorrow. As I walked him to the door, he turned and looked at me, hands in his pockets, shoulders relaxed. I never thought I'd come back to this neighborhood and find something that felt like home. You did, I replied, and you weren't the only one. After he left, I stood alone in the kitchen, hand on the counter, heart still warm from the night. I didn't need to know every detail of what tomorrow would bring. I just needed to know that I wasn't invisible anymore. That something real was growing in the soil of connection, respect, and gentle discovery. It wasn't a fairy tale. It was better. It was true.